Welcome into Red Raider Recon, episode 4. I'm Clint Scott. He's Rob Bro.
I am Rob Bro. Clint, we've talked about Mac Leftwich. We've talked about the overall show. We've talked about quarterbacks. But at Texas Tech, there's one position group that I think shines above the rest in the last 30 years.
Kickers.
Wide receivers.
Last season, the Red Raiders finally had a receiver break the 1,000-yard barrier. Antoine Wesley did it back in 2018. Since then, it's been a dry spell. That is until Josh Kelly transferred in from Washington State. In his lone season, he led the group, finishing with 1,023 yards on 89 catches. That also was a team-high mark. But with Kelly now aiming to play on Sundays, who can pick up where he left off? Caleb Douglas and Eakin returned as key targets for Baron Morton. Douglas was second in receptions with 60, finishing the season with 877 yards and 6 touchdowns. He also boasted a 14.6 yard per catch average. Eakin also had a solid season with 652 yards while also catching a team-leading 7 touchdowns. The offense also added Miami of Ohio wideout Reggie Virgil to the mix. He'll come to Tech with 1 season of eligibility, finishing last season with just over 800 yards for the Red Hawks. Between the receivers and tight ends, the Red Raiders also said goodbye to dynamic targets like Jalen Conyers, Mason Tharp, and Micah Hudson, while bringing in equally exciting targets like Roy Alexander, Terrance Carter Jr., and Micah Hudson. Carter was the lone tight end from the transfer portal. He's been a Louisiana Raging Cajun the past 3 years, coming to Tech as a redshirt junior. The All-Sun Belt first-teamer was the highest-rated tight end in the portal and the 5th highest-rated tight end overall last year. In total, there are 10 new faces in the receiver and tight end rooms, 4 from the transfer portal and 6 from the freshman class. That list includes intriguing local products Leighton Stone and Michael Deaver. There are also other returning pieces like John Carlos Miller II and Kelby Valson, who are all looking to make a bigger impact this fall.
Thank you, Big Voice Clint. Incredible job. So a lot of new faces coming in, but some faces leaving. Who do you think is the biggest loss? And why is it maybe a tight end?
I see what you're leading me into. It's still hard not to go Josh Kelly just because of how much he delivered. I think between he and Jalen Conyers, you are replacing a couple clearly different types of players, different things. But Josh Kelly, you for a position that was once feared, as you started the video, what you were leading us into, a position that you were dominant at for years and years and years. You've had different coaches, obviously from the Leach era, and even you had some really good receivers come through with Cliff. But since the Wells era, the receivers have been wanting. Part of it's when you don't have a quarterback,
right?
That's not going to help. I think you have that dry spell, but to just speak out of both sides of my mouth, you have like an Eric Izukama, who super talented.
That's exactly the name I was thinking of.
Did some good things here, but overall, I guess the production is what you were looking for.
Yeah, hard to be productive all year when you have 4 different quarterbacks.
And Josh Kelly though still came in, and there's it was a guy who had played 5 years of football before he got here, had 4 at Fresno State, had the 1 season at Washington State, looked good in having to do my math here, year 3 at Fresno State, had the injury year, or comes in at Washington State, looked like he's prime, 900-yard season there for the Cougars. But still, you never know. It's a 1-year guy. How's he going to fit in the scheme? How's the chemistry going to go? Can he produce in a different conference? All of these questions, and then came in and gave you the best season that you've had from a receiver since Antoine Wesley. But past just the numbers, I just thought he was so consistent. And that's something that you're asking throughout the roster. I thought he was really good on third downs. I think he found who he was on the offense and was instantly someone not only you could trust, but something that I think every offense needs, quickly developed into the number 1 target. And that's just hard to replace.
I don't know where to find this stat, but on the TV broadcast several times late in the year, they said, there's Josh Kelly on third down. He's the most targeted receiver in the country on third down. Mm-hmm. And again, that's quantity, but you also have the quality because he did have 1,000 yards. He had the volume. But then you go to Jalen Conyers, and yeah, Josh Kelly was great on third down. He's your number 1 wide receiver probably until maybe the end of the year, and I really think Caleb Douglas overtook him, but you had a great season from Josh Kelly. But on Conyers' side, which is what I was kind of leading into here, he threw for a touchdown. He caught touchdowns. He ran for touchdowns. He ran for first downs. He blocked really well. And I thought that was kind of a question mark coming in. Can he be an inline blocker instead of just an outside receiver playing the tight end role? So I do think that you have capable bodies replacing Jalen Conyers, but they can't replace everything he did. I don't think Terrance Carter is going to come in and run the Wildcat.
Yeah.
But I do think he's going to come in and do everything else that Jalen Conyers did. And I think John Carlos Miller's a kind of a weapon that we haven't unleashed yet
I think Jalen Conyers, to your point, is one of the most unique players and dynamic players that you've seen, certainly in the McGuire era. That being said, it's just hard for me. Yes?
I had a separate thought. Continue yours.
It's hard for me to look at a guy that finished, 7th in the Big 12 and go, you're for sure going to replace that, even though we'll get to this a little bit later on. But like you said, Caleb Douglas.
Conyers was 7th in the Big 12?
Sorry, Josh Kelly.
Oh, okay.
Josh Kelly.
You meant amongst tight ends.
For my Kelly argument.
Right.
But at the same time, I think we both are sitting here, and you can pick your A-B preference here to answer that question and go, they both did really good things for you that even though you might feel good about the roster, you still have to see them do it. And I think the as we're combining the receivers and tight ends here, the weapons, if you will, I think the tight end is suddenly a very, very curious case. I'm going to throw some numbers at you in a little bit for tight end usage, because that's always been the complaint. But you're not just getting rid of, or not trying to replace Conyers, you're also trying to replace Mason Tharp, who, Conyers comes in, shows the ability to do different things, like you talked about. Personally, my favorite thing that he developed into was when you mentioned the blocking. When he was a lead blocker, he was fantastic. And I think late in the season, second half of the season is probably a better way to say that. I think he turned into Josh Brooks' best friend.
Yeah.
And I think that was something that maybe was underrated about him, and I think it's going to help him at the next level as an undrafted free agent. For Mason Tharp, I think he really came, and we almost set the expectations. I say we as fans, a little bit larger than life. Now, that's not to knock what he ended up doing here. He also battled through some injuries. I think he played really tough. Personally, like when he was making plays, when you were going to him, he was one of my favorite players to watch. But he maybe in some regards never reached these high mountain tops either we set for him through our own imagination, expectations, whatever, but also what we were being told from the coaching staff, I think, plays a part in that. But you turn into the tight end room now, and you obviously have John Carlos Miller, and then you add in the best tight end prospect through the portal in Terrance Carter, and you go, okay, can you guys take the reins? But the other question is, well, Mac Leftwich, what will he use? If you go down the tight end order of that usage conversation, to me, it'll go in what will decide that in this order. It'll go Mac Leftwich, it'll go Baron Morton, it'll go offensive line play, and then their own talent.
Yeah, if the offensive line is struggling, you need the hot routes, you need the quick action, you need the seams and whatever else. But even as a deep threat, I think John Carlos Miller is going to be underrated. He was really good at Elon going deep. And I know you got Reggie Virgil, who's kind of a deep threat merchant. We'll see what he can do underneath. But I think you replace Josh Kelly in the aggregate, to borrow a Moneyball term. I don't think you can replace...
This is Josh Kelly.
Jalen Conyers. Yeah. I don't think you can replace Jalen Conyers. But does Eakin take some Wildcat snaps? Of course, it's a different offense. So
that's my question. Is like, who is there going to be that? Is there going to be as much of the bag, if you will, in the offense?
So if you're trying to replace those things, I think he was just such a singular player. Maybe you don't worry about replacing some of what Jalen Conyers did. But I'm very excited about the tight end room. I think you improved. I think you improved your tight end room overall.
I think as a best pure receiving tight end, Terrance Carter will be that, and I'm excited to see what John Carlos Miller does now that he should have a bigger role. And again, just to go with the usage verbiage, because it's driven me up the wall the past 2-3 years. When we think that, we're just looking at receiving production.
Yep.
The tight ends were used. They were on the field. They were playing. And in the end, their stats really weren't that bad, especially last year. But I think whenever you go into the actual usage for the pass game and actual like receiving numbers and stats put up, it'll be interesting for Leftwich because something we talked about in his episode is there's not just this giant history of tight ends putting up big numbers or really numbers at all. Was that just lack of tight end resources, if you will, or is that the offense? That's something I think obviously we'll find out this year. But you talk about Caleb Douglas and Coy Eakin, if we can jump to them. Those are your two biggest returning pieces. You've added several through the portal, and I think some pieces obviously to be really excited about. But for the two targets who produced for you last year, what do they need to be for the offense this year? And will they be that, or what will they be?
I mean, Caleb Douglas needs to be your number one.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know,
Hey, look, that's the first thing I wrote down on mine.
Need.
Douglas needs to be a standout number one target. Right there. There you go.
Good. Yeah.
Agreed.
Simpatico. I think Douglas needs to be your number one. I hope Coy Eakin is your third down threat. And again, if you're trying to do it in the aggregate and you're trying to say who's the security blanket, who is reliable, and then who's going to be you need a first down, it's 3rd and 15 in the third quarter, you're up 7 or down 7. Like everybody knows it's going to Caleb Douglas and he still makes the play.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he was that late in the year. You're throwing to him deep. He's making those plays. He was really reliable late. Like he dropped a few early and then really got strong at the end. Made a great play at the bowl, kind of stealing an interception. So if you're just asking about those two, I think the combo certainly needs to replace the volume and exceeded of Josh Kelly. But you also have to have one of those guys really step up on third down. And whether that's the back shoulder king, Coy Eakin, can you run the underneath stuff as well as Josh Kelly did, the tunnel screens and otherwise, the drag, because that's really where Josh Kelly excelled. Can you catch the underneath stuff and still make a first down? I think both those guys have to do that. I think you don't have to have those as your top two wide receivers to succeed, because I think two of the new guys can do that if it's a tight end or one of the receivers. But I do think that Caleb Douglas has to be the alpha in the room. Like you have to have a go-to receiver, and I think Caleb Douglas is going to be it.
Yeah, I that's when I look at Douglas first. That's where I go to. Is I do think he needs to be that standout number one target, and mostly because I don't think he's a step away from being that. And you already said, I mean, you thought he had turned into that by the end of last year anyway. So to me, just the natural progression is to confirm that. And if this offense does what is intended, I can't imagine you won't have a receiver without some Big 12 honors. And I think Caleb Douglas is the first one that jumps to my mind for that. I think he's got as good of a shot as anybody on your team to earn all Big 12 honors when it's all said and done. And Josh Kelly said earlier he finishes 7th in receiving yards. What we didn't really talk about is Caleb Douglas finished 10th. Mm-hmm. And of those guys that are coming back on that list, you know how many are from that top 10?
Let's see. Two?
Caleb Douglas and Jordan Tyson at Arizona State.
Oh, so even the maybe the UCF receivers didn't do as well as I thought.
No, they didn't.
Wow, okay.
And so that's, if you're going...
Yeah, Iowa State all gone, Arizona gone.
TCU, Besh is gone.
BYU.
All of those guys that were in front of them outside of Tyson are gone. And so, again, you're going to bring in new receivers everywhere in the conference, and other guys are going to get better. I think Baylor, they've got a really good receiver.
Yes.
I'm not saying that the Big 12 that it'll be easy, but if you're looking for guys that have already shown that they can compete with everybody, it's Caleb Douglas. And I think also when you pair in Leftwich's offense, he's the first player that I thought of with like, should be a dream setup with him as a deep vertical threat, RPO type offense. It seems like everything that he was able to do well, if he can just, again, to bring back the consistency word. And I think he got better and better, by the way, as the year went on last year too. That's the guy that's battled injuries. So yes, he's played through years, but like not a lot of games before he got here. I think last year playing the full season was very beneficial, and you saw him progress with that. If he can continue on that trend, he could have I'm trying to stay away from the dominant word, but a great year. And then for Eakin, you mentioned it for me. I mean, he and Morton clearly have chemistry, and I do like him as the safety blanket. And for Eakin, maybe undervalued, the undervalued part for him is his workhorse ability, and I think that's something that sets him apart. And you look at 2018 when we talked about it in the videos, the last time you had a 1,000-yard receiver. It was also the last time you had a balanced room where your second highest receiver broke 800 like Douglas did last year, and the third guy broke 600 like Eakin did. And so, I mean, that was Wesley, Jadion High, and TJ Vasher. For like, what does this room need to be before we get to the new faces? I might go back a couple of years before that. You mentioned balanced. If you go into the room that had like Jonathan Giles, Kiki Kuti, Dylan Cantrell, and Cameron Batson, where you had like 1,000, 800, 600, 600, when you start talking about Alexander and you talk about Reggie Virgil, I think that room could be something attainable for this group. But I just think for Douglas, I think he has to confirm that number one spot and be that lead dog. And then Eakin, I mean, stick with what you've been doing. Keep doing what you're doing. And if bigger numbers come, that's just a bonus, right? So that's where I'm at with those two guys. But, okay, so new faces. Let's start with Reggie Virgil. What does he need to be? What did you think of him as a portal acquisition?
I am a positive person. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
I really am. Probably to a fault, right? Well, as far as Tech Athletics goes.
I'm just kidding.
I really try to be positive. And so when I see guys come in, and I trust Blanchard and I trust this recruiting staff and the scouting staff, and when I saw Caleb Douglas come in from Florida, I said, well, he catches a lot of touchdowns for the few catches he has. And I really think injuries hurt him to be more prolific there at Florida. And I think their quarterback situation did as well. Virgil just seemingly was there for 3 years and then broke out and had a pretty good year last year, really good. But is that replicatable? I don't know. And when I looked at Virgil and watched him play, and because everything I look at when you're getting a transfer or a recruit, it's like, who else is what? And it seemed like everybody wanted Reggie Virgil. I mean, you got him above some other big programs. And so, what do I expect from him? I don't know. I think if he gets a couple deep shots a game, it's probably going to be good. But I don't expect him to have 8, 9. I don't expect him to be the second wide receiver. I expect him to probably be the fourth or fifth and an option late when you need a deep shot or a play action shot early. Maybe 300-400 yards and 5 touchdowns. Like, I just don't expect a lot from Reggie Virgil this year.
He just seems to me to have this boom or bust mystery shrouded around him because, like you said, like 95% of his collegiate production came last year. And it just, like you said, it's not like he was new to the Red Hawks. To be fair, I don't know what their situation was like when he was a freshman and a sophomore. But last year does just like come on the scene. And even then, it was like, well, if everybody else wants him, everybody is seeing something with him. When they're scouting him, they're seeing something that they think can contribute on their team. And is that contribute for just to the sake of the conversation? Is that for insert, whoever wants him for their 1, for their 3, for 2, for special teams and receiver. I'm not sure what that will end up being for you. And so I think if you do get anywhere around like 500-600 yards, something around there, it's hard for me not to call it a success. But at the same time, he could be a guy that pops off, and he found his stride with the Red Hawks, and now he's another year better, and he can compete in the Big 12 too, and just has this great year. And so he brings a lot of mystery when it just comes down to here was his 1 year, and it was really good.
As a sophomore, he played 74 snaps, 5 inside, 69 outside, and had 1 catch.
Yeah.
It's a 34-yard touchdown. And then last year in 2024, he played 585 snaps and had 40 catches.
It's kind of a head scratcher.
And I understand there's probably a bunch of guys in front of him that are really good, and Miami of Ohio, whatever it is. But to not even get on the field for 2 years and then to have 40 catches, I think he's a great athlete. I think he could certainly come here and do good. But I think if you're starting 3 wide receivers, it's Douglas, Eakin, and Alexander. I don't even know that Virgil's a starter in my mind. Now, if you're going 4 wide, certainly. But I'd rather have Terrance Carter out there. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
He might be, of this conversation, the player I'm second most interested to see how he's used.
Very intrigued.
Roy Alexander is another big transfer that you get from Incarnate Word. Before that, he was at Albany. There's an even bigger jump with him from the level, clearly, but still, you want production. He's had a 1,000-yard guy last year, around 2,500 yards in his career. I think total offense, it's closer to 2,600 when you put in some rush things. He's been used in special teams. I do wonder, for what you're talking about, who's going to be the 3. If it works out how, in my mind, how I've shaped it, and it seems like he's got a great route to that, if you will, to make a receiver punt. Heyo. But he's also a guy that when you add in the FCS math equation, can he pop off? Can he come in and just be well, nope, he can do it on this level as well, and it's going to be similar production. By the way, I keep throwing this number around just because it's the easy thing to compare. I don't think you necessarily need to have a 1,000-yard guy, but if you don't, you need to have close to 9 and 8. And if you have that sort of thing with Douglas and with Eakin or with Alexander or with Virgil, I think those are attainable numbers, but also that's a route to a lot of wins and a good offense.
Yeah.
And so can Alexander do that?
Alexander had 140 targets last year.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think he'll get that this year, just based on volume. I think Caleb Douglas might. So Alexander was 139 targets, 101 catches. That's 72%. You go back to Virgil, he had 79 targets and 41 catches, which is 50%.
Mm-hmm.
So 50% catch rate versus 72% catch rate. It just, I don't know. And that's a lot of, underneath routes versus deep routes. If you're just chunking them deep and your quarterback's not very accurate, that's not your fault. But I do think Virgil will play a lot and get a bunch of deep targets, but I just don't know that he gets the volume.
Yeah.
And Alexander, I think, could see some volume. And it could be that Eakin also plays inside, because they talked about that before they got Alexander, and that Virgil and Douglas would be the outside and Eakin will move inside. But I think those 4 receivers are your top 4, obviously. And that leaves a returner slash transfer.
This is why I stopped myself and said the second most
Yeah.
Because the most interested in him, it's Micah Hudson. I mean, Hudson is now such an odd story, highest ever recruit. He has the talent to play day one. And don't get me wrong, the receivers from 2 years ago, he had a much better shot.
Yeah.
Even though I think last year's room is clearly improved, but then you also have the other stuff outside of just an upgraded position, group. Was there a playbook issue? Was there something going on behind the scenes? Was he a head case? Did the coaching staff not handle it well? There's all these questions that we have that we'll truly never know what happened, behind closed doors. But either way, he's suddenly on the redemption path, right? Now it's suddenly a comeback story. The 5-star talent is still there. But for me, one, you would think if they wouldn't have added him back if they didn't think that they could iron out whatever the issues were from last year, regardless of the talent. And I think clearly that is the case, that they think that. But, you go from having the chance to being one of this great talent sort of story to now maybe one of the most unique ones if it goes well. And it wouldn't just be like one of the most unique stories with Tech. It'd be like one of the most unique stories across college football.
Yeah, absolutely.
What does he, because last year it was like he's going to play, he's going to go day one, he's going to, he could he get 500, 600 yards? What's it? And we were going like, what are these baselines? Well, I don't know what to think this year. I have no idea. He's like the ultimate wild card to me.
Yeah. Do you think Reggie Virgil or Micah Hudson gets more targets in 2026? 25.
I'm having to think on this one. I'm going to take Virgil. I think it'll end up being Virgil.
Saying everything I just said about Reggie Virgil, I still think it's going to be Reggie Virgil.
Yeah.
I just don't see Micah Hudson making an impact. And I hope he does. I do think he's very talented. And if in 2 years it's, Micah Hudson, or in 3 years, if it's senior Micah Hudson and redshirt sophomore Deaver and Leighton Stone, and they're leading the new charge, and it's a bunch of homegrown wide receivers, and you have one transfer in, I'd be very excited about that. But until we see it, right? I just
it's hard with how sure I was last year to be sure on anything.
Yeah.
With him. It's not I've been burnt before. It's just last year was such a head scratcher. It's just such an odd situation. It's hard for me to feel confident either way. I think that's where I go. I think he is the ultimate wild card because, again, the talent is still there. So this year, if you can, straighten out whatever was going on last year, that guy we were all excited about is in there and can play. And if they hit on that now in year one as a transfer, I mean, he's going to see the field, but there's just a question about things with that, at least this year, because now it feels like his sophomore year he's going to be your speaking of number one guys, he's going to have all of these numbers and stuff. Now it's turned into what does it look like as it progresses down the road.
Yeah, you had 530 pass attempts last year. And just based on reception, I guess we should go receptions instead of... You had 295 completions. Josh Kelly had 89. Caleb Douglas had 60. Then you had a 50, 30. Taj Brooks had 28. And then you go 12, 13, 8, 10, 10, 12, 9, 3. So last year there wasn't, because I think you'll throw to the running backs more this year. And I think Terrance Carter probably matches what Jalen Conyers did. That's 30 catches, 320. And maybe he gets some of Miller's too. But if you're saying Caleb Douglas gets 75 catches and Alexander gets 60 catches and Eakin gets 60 catches and Carter gets 30 catches, and you're starting to run out of numbers pretty quick. Mm-hmm. So that's why I'm saying what I'm saying about Virgil. That's what I'm saying about Micah Hudson. Not everybody can catch 100 balls because you're only throwing at tops 500 passes.
Well, the fun part of this conversation, which is also can be difficult to balance and to make sure you're using and maxing out everybody that you have in the talent, you have a lot of mouths to feed.
Yeah.
A lot of what I think can be productive mouths.
I think it's a really good wide receiver room.
Yeah.
Or pass catcher room.
So Now let's get to the tight ends. Terrance Carter Jr. I think has a chance to be special.
He's the best pass-catching tight end at Texas Tech since Jason Morrow. There's not been a lot.
Yeah, I'm not doubting that. I guess since Jason Morrow. Yeah. I think it's going to be hard to. I was thinking in my head it's going to be hard to attain that kind of status.
Oh yeah, well Jason Morrow was the number one wide receiver on a team, and he was the tight end, and the team never used tight ends. he was revolutionary, but
yes, okay, agreed. But even with the question of like, well, does Leftwich use tight ends? You wouldn't be bringing in by the way, rated 5th overall last year from tight ends. Overall, not just number one target, number one tight end in the portal, because you could have gone like, okay, well, probably wasn't a lot of tight ends. He was really good, and he's gotten better and better. You wouldn't be bringing him in if you didn't plan on using him.
Top 3 PFF returner at tight end in all of college football. I think he's a better receiver than Jalen Conyers. Again, I think Jalen Conyers did more things. Jalen Conyers is a really good wide receiver. That's how highly I think of Terrance Carter. I think he's really good.
Mm-hmm.
You have to use it.
Now this is a perfect time to go to this. Now, when we say use him, I think the walking away thought, even from last year when you used them as the tight end room more than you had and found ways to do it. There's like, well, you still just didn't use them. You didn't get out everything that you said you were going to. You want to guess a little guessing game here? What the league average for receiving yards from tight ends was?
League average. Is this leading tight end receiver or all tight ends?
All tight ends.
128 yards.
It's 423, which is more than I would have guessed.
Average?
Yeah. You had 158 more than that. You know where you ranked?
Oh, okay. As a team.
As a team.
Okay. I thought we were going individual tight ends.
I'm
I was
sorry.
like, that is insane. Okay.
As a team.
Okay, I'm caught up now.
Whole tight end usage per team.
I'm caught up. Yes, you outpaced that. And what? Conyers had 330. Yeah, you're probably second.
You had 581. You know where that finished in the Big 12?
Well, that's an average at
23.
423. It's probably pretty high. You probably finished third behind Iowa State. And who was using tight ends like that? Baylor.
Utah.
Oh, yeah.
Utah was number 1. Iowa State was number 2. You were exactly number 3. Just for fun, you want to guess the rest of the top 5?
Baylor's not in the top 5? Or is Baylor in the top 5? Baylor.
No, they're not in the top 5. They were number 6.
Okay. So it's not a terrible guess. Who's using tight ends like that? Boom, boom, bang, bang. Well, Kansas State generally, but I don't. Kansas State?
They were 7th. They just didn't have the total receiving production.
I'm excited about I can't remember his first name. Brown. I was going to say the Brown kid, but that sounds bad. Brown. JC?
Josh, can you scratch that?
JC? Nah, that's right. JC Brown. Just don't clip it. JC Brown?
I think that sounds right.
He's good.
Yeah.
He didn't get a lot of targets, but that guy could be a breakout.
I feel like you're stalling.
Hold on.
I feel like you're stalling to guess.
Yeah, I was. BYU.
They were 13th.
Wow. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm struggling to Kansas. Kansas got to be number 4.
11th. They took a little bit of step back at the tight end spot.
Wow, you're telling me the Applebee's guy didn't have
Jared Casey had a fine year. Individually, he had a good year, sir. Applebee's guy. I'll give you Who is it? I'll give you one more guess.
Give me a hint. I don't want to just name every team.
Neither were top teams.
Oklahoma State.
One fired their coach. The other is going to fire their coach.
Okay, Arizona.
No.
West Virginia?
West Virginia was 5.
Okay. And then gonna fire their coach, but it's not Arizona.
That's a personal prediction.
Oh. So somebody you don't like.
2 animals together. Oh, it's not someone I dislike.
2 animals together is the mascot?
Uh-huh.
What?
How do you do that? Did they do the hand sign? I'm confusing you more.
Bearcat? Oh, Cincinnati. Satterfield's got to be fired.
Cincinnati.
He stinks. He stinks.
I don't hate him.
I don't even think of Cincinnati in the Big 12.
They're fourth.
Bearcats.
I will let that go on too long.
No, that was
nothing for the audience. Thank you for hanging out with
all
us.
that, John.
That was so much more for me.
The last 3 minutes.
So you would be frustrated.
I was so good in the first three, and then you were like, I got to get him back.
You just rattled off.
I got to I got to prove this guy's not as smart as he thinks he is. Let's make him name the other 16 teams.
Anyways, this is the most roundabout way to say, yes, you used your tight ends.
What about the tight ends?
Then
you ever notice the big wide receiver?
What's the deal with tight ends?
This is the worst time.
The block and the catch. What are we doing?
Oh, that was
mine was great.
Mine was bad. Yeah, mine was really bad.
Yeah. Anyways, to circle back, how did we get here?
You did all that.
I did it.
You did all that. Oh yeah, we'll have a quick episode.
I didn't say that.
72 minutes in.
I didn't say that.
Who was the 73rd tight end?
You want to guess who was last in the Big 12? I bet you can get it.
Well, we've already done so many teams. Who have I not said? UCF.
Colorado.
Oh, they
67 yards.
They
tight ends. Oklahoma State, who I in general would have had that as a good guess.
Yeah.
And their mess of a year last year, tight ends were responsible for 111 receiving yards.
Wow.
They were 15th in the conference.
Wow. Kansas was the most shocking there at 11th.
Yeah, I mean,
because they're like real tight end.
You bring in a grimy offensive coordinator. You bring in a guy that's not Kelnecki.
I was thinking Kelnecki.
And also, I just don't think they had the horses behind Casey. Casey's really good in a 1-2 punch if the one is good.
5 of the top 7 before any strikes, and then I just couldn't close.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about John Carlos Miller.
He's a lot like Reggie Virgil to me. Last year, I don't think he was particularly used correctly, but I do think he'll be a great deep threat in this offense.
Mm-hmm.
I think the play action passing with a 2 tight end set. You familiar with tight end attack?
On video games?
Out of
playbooks?
Pistol Ace?
Yes, I am.
2 tight ends?
I think you know I am.
Or so you have 5 offensive linemen, right?
Uh-huh.
Center guard, tackle.
Uh-huh.
And you have an inline tight end and an H-back out wide.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you ran an outside zone play action pass and had a double post with the tight ends, Carter and Miller would wreak havoc. I mean, I think that's going to be a really big part of the offense. Not only play action passing, but the mismatch of getting a linebacker or a safety on John Carlos Miller or Terrance Carter. I mean, Terrance Carter is mossing people at spring practice all spring. And I think John Carlos Miller was like, you had the long touchdown against North Texas, right up the seam. I was shocked you didn't do that the rest of the year.
I think I'm expecting them to, but I think that in this conversation it puts even extra importance to look at Caleb Douglas and look at Coy Eakin. Like you guys have to be threats.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, if you're able to take away or you're not consistent or it's not a sure thing, then some of that mismatch stuff that I totally agree with, especially with Carter, goes away because you can throw a couple things at him, right? And so I think that that's important in that conversation too.
I mean, I think John Carlos Miller could have an insane stat line like 15 catches, 285 yards, and 4 touchdowns. Just because I think you could break off a couple of big ones with him.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think he'll be the like the underneath threat, like a lot of tight ends or a bunch of hooks or whatever else. But I think you could be a really big threat.
Okay, so let's move on. I mentioned the word wild card earlier for Micah Hudson. Who are some other maybe wild cards that could maybe not quite break out, but could certainly contribute? Find the field.
Yeah, Kelby Valson's a kid who has been talked about, right?
Mhm.
And here's a guy that has been mentioned, right? Mentioned several times.
I think a guy that is willing to do the dirty work with special teams and has made some big plays. I think back to what you're talking about, I think all of that can certainly maybe open some doors to the offense.
I think in the concept of the passing game, which is what we're talking about, we haven't talked about running backs yet. But I do think that Jacoby Williams and Joyner could be quality pass catchers. But I think if I'm going really off the board, and somebody who I think could be huge at Texas Tech in the future, but really could break out as a freshman, would be Michael Deaver from Cooper.
MD3.
I think he's so good. I think your early enrollees,
all are very interesting. Michael Deaver does have that explosive capability. Leighton Stone, big body, athletic, can go up and get it. Look good in the spring game. You also have Preston Harrison, the kid from Mineral Wells. 6'5", 210, play a little bit of tight end, a little bit of receiver. That's one I'm maybe not so much expecting that this year, but when you look at guys like dreaming of what the career could look like, I think all three of those guys are very exciting. Another one that is interesting for this year, specifically from the tight end room, is I feel like we've heard some things about Trey Jackson, and there's another big body, another athletic guy, South Oak Cliff kid. Does he find
redshirt freshman?
Mm-hmm. And I just asked because, you did, again, different offense, and we can keep bouncing back to that. But even with Miller, you still knew he was tight end number 3 and still found the field. Can that be Trey Jackson this year? We'll find out. But I'm interested in all 4 of those names. But I agree with you. The easy pick for me would be Kelby Balson.
Yeah, I think so. And then I do agree with some of these tight ends, like is Llewellyn a guy that comes in and blocks a lot?
Yeah.
And then gets some of these leak passes on a play action. And again, I'm thinking so much about the Kitley offense and what it developed into last year. I think off the top of my head, the Mac Leftwich offense had one quality tight end, but didn't really throw to him a ton. But is that, hey, we don't trust this guy, we trust our receivers more? Or is that, he's pretty good, we just don't use the tight ends?
Mm-hmm.
I think when you're coming here, you have such a wealth of tight end talent. I don't have any qualms or I don't have any preconceived issues with that. I think Mac Leftwich won't use them.
Again, I just keep going back to you wouldn't have put the room together that you have, especially adding Terrance Carter, if you weren't at least pitching to him like, yeah, you're going to come here. We might use you. We might not. We think you're great.
Yeah.
All right, let's jump to our fan question of the week as we start to wrap up today's episode. Appreciate you joining us here on a Thursday. Again, you can submit a question of the week yourself to our personal Twitters, which you can check right across the chest right here. You can also, I was thinking yours on yours, but thanks. You can also follow Double T973 on Twitter and put a question there. Just make sure to.
You didn't give it enough space.
Oh, sorry, there's a lot of letters. Make sure to attribute it to Red Raider Recon, so we know that you're asking it to us and just not the station.
Or the midweek mailbag.
You
could also ask midweek mailbag questions.
Yeah. Uh-huh. This week's question: of the undrafted free agents from last year's team, who has the best shot in the NFL?
A few moments later.
Josh Kelly. I think just the nature of the Cowboys roster.
Mm-hmm.
They did not go and get a wide receiver before the draft since they've gotten George Pickens from Pittsburgh. But I just think those are so in line 1-2 CeeDee Lamb and him. I think there's space with Jalen Tolbert and as the 3, and then who's 4th or 5th there? I mean, if Josh Kelly can go run some special teams reps, I think he could absolutely make the roster. And then you're a player or two away from being on the field and making impacts.
So funny. This is a very full circle moment. We started the episode where I took Josh Kelly for an answer and you took Jalen Conyers for an answer. We're going to switch it here. I think both of these guys have a great shot to make the roster. And I think both Josh Kelly and Jalen Conyers have a great shot as undrafted free agents to carve out careers in the NFL. I would go Jalen Conyers. I think his versatility is not only something that NFL teams value, but specifically when you go to the Dolphins. I mean, Mike McDaniels loves him a unicorn. Like, he likes guys that can do different things, and that is exactly who Jalen Conyers is. I also think that position specifically with the Dolphins, they've got Jonnu Smith, they have their main guy, but they had 4 different tight ends catch passes last year. One of those is gone. Smith's playing with the Bears. So you have a couple of guys, and Julian Hill and Tanner Connor, who's a little bit older, who are still on the roster. They brought in a journeyman with Pharaoh Brown, who's had a 8-year career, but hasn't really done much, at least in the passing game. You know, it seems more like a blocking tight end, but he's made rosters consistently. So you're still going to have to beat some people out. But I look at like what Mike McDaniel likes in players and how that offense can do different things. And I also see an open route to the roster. I feel pretty good about that pick. I'll be honest. I was surprised, not shocked, but surprised he wasn't drafted. But it hasn't changed my mind on him having staying power in the NFL.
Yeah, I was surprised he wasn't drafted. I was also surprised he chose to go to the Dolphins. But as you said, it's not Mike Gesicki's world anymore.
Nope, it's not. What's that name? In the worst. Is he the one doing the worst gritty of all time? Is that Gesicki?
That rings a bell, yeah.
Are we still doing the gritty? Are we gritting on the way out?
We aren't. What do you mean still? We've never done that. Have you been grittying on the way out of here?
No. That would be stupid. Next week, we're going to talk about the running backs. Appreciate you joining us for another...
The running backs, yo!
See you next Thursday, Red Raider.